Hello everybody. Today I was honored with a visit from a technical engineer and the managing director of ULPower. In one of my previous videos I explained that I'm installing a ULPower 520 IS in my RV-7, which is an exception to the IO 360 that most people install with this model. However, ULPower is also working on a turbo version of the 520. Since there are not many people who have a RV-7 with an installed ULPower 520, Patrick de Norme from ULPower in Belgium asked if he could visit me to take measurements of my finished cowl of my RV-7 to see if a turbo version of the 520 would fit in my setup. I was fortunate that Patrick also brought Jacob with him, who is a technical engineer and could help me with the connection issues I have with the ECU and my MGL avionics. Patrick and Jacob carefully inspected my setup and looked at the places where the turbo should be attached to the engine and if there was enough space left in my cowl to accommodate a turbo and even an intercooler, because that is almost inevitable with a turbo. And they were very positive of the amount of space that was still available in my cowl. They took several pictures and made some sketches so that they can work out the details back in the factory in Belgium. Patrick and Jacob also helped me with an issue I had with my MGL avionics. I have an Extreme AFIS and AMS, and I use the MGL RDAX and also the ECU, of course, of the ULPower engine. And there is an issue with the CAN bus where every device, of course, has its own address. And I was unable to connect both the sensors from the engine and some additional sensors like CHT and EGT to the various RDACs, connecting them to my AMS and EFIS. Fortunately, Jacob had a laptop with him. We connected that to my ECU, and this way we could troubleshoot the issue. And also I found it very valuable to order such a RS-232 cable, which enables me to connect my own laptop to the ECU, because it gives you a lot of extra information on it. ULPower has a special piece of software called ULRead. You can just download it from their site, and this way you can get a lot of more information from your ECU, especially for troubleshooting your own avionics setup. That is very handy. I'm glad that I could help ULPower with showing my setup, and I'm thankful that Jacob and Patrick helped me with my avionics issue. Now I can continue checking the avionics and make the correct setup in my AFIS and MGL, setting the right sensors and grids. Okay, next up is the fuel lines. I had a fuel setup which was not completely correct, and unfortunately now I have to crawl into the airplane because I already covered the forward top skin, which I can't stress enough that it is very easy if you are not installing the forward top skin before you have all your avionics and your fuel lines set up correctly, because it's not very handy to crawl into the cramped space through the cockpit. I decided not to use the standard fuel system brackets that you can install on the firewall or some other place, but instead trim out the same profile from the bottom plate between the two rudder pedals in the RV-7. This limits the height of the fuel system and it reduces a lot of space, also a little weight of course, but it results in some extra work because you have to do the cutouts all yourself. Especially the connection to the fuel bulkheads through the firewall is a lot of work, because again the space is cramped and it's very narrow, very tight fit, so it takes some extra care to make that correct and of course also leak free. I'm not sure how many times I've created the fuel line between the fine fuel filter and the bulkhead through the firewall. I guess at least 3 or 4 times, but it took me several tries to create a correct fuel line, because there are two 45 degrees angles in there, and yeah, it is. They are so close to each other that you cannot use a normal fuel line bending pliers. So that took me some time. But if you struggle with aluminum fuel lines for a few hours, you actually learn it and you get the hang of it. So in the end I wound up with a real nice short connection between the filter and the bulkhead. The only thing which is a little bit worrying is that it's probably not very handy for maintenance. So after 15 hours you have to replace the coarse and also the fine fuel filters. And probably then every 50 hours, I'm not sure, I have to check the manual, but at least you have to regularly replace them. Because I made such a very compact setup, it's not very easy to remove the fuel filters. So in hindsight, I could have probably made another setup which would increase maintainability. But hey, I do maintenance myself, so I'm the one who's having all the pain. So from the analysis with Jacob, I could figure out that the ECU was set up correctly and that the RS-232 interface was giving the correct measurements. But still, the CAN bus didn't give me the correct settings on the MGL AVIS and AMS. So I had to figure out why that was the case, and I found that the CAN bus connection from the ECU to the ULP RDEC, which is a special MGL RDEC designed for ULPower engines. In the drawing of that connection, well, you can buy a pre-built wiring harness, or you can build your own. Obviously, I built my own, which was maybe not so smart because it took me a considerable time to debug it. There was an error in the drawings, which resulted in a CAN bus high, CAN bus low reversal, which is a very common mistake. And I could measure that because the way the CAN bus is set up, you can determine which one is high and which one is low. The name already reveals it a little bit, of course. However, I had to remove the ULPower air duct and open it to see what was wrong with it. Finally, I found a mistake in the wiring and I corrected that. And then the CAN bus measurements were matching up with the RS-232 measurements. Okay, continuing building my pie in the sky.